knew she was going to die today. She had known it from the moment the guards came to her cell and dragged her through the stone corridors of the grand arena. She had known it when they threw a dull blade at her feet and pushed her through the iron gates onto the sand. She knew it now as she stood in the center of the arena and watched her opponent step into the light. The Unbroken was everything the story said he was. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with gray-scaled skin that looked like armor. His arms were thick as tree trunks, and his yellow eyes burned with cruel pleasure. He carried a war hammer that most could not even lift. In 12 years of arena combat, he had never lost a single match. He had killed over 200 opponents, and he had enjoyed every single death. The crowd roared his name. 50,000 filled the stone seats that rose up around the arena like a bowl. They stomped their feet and chanted for blood. They had come to watch kill again, and he would not disappoint them. Gripped her blade and tried to steady her breathing. She was small for a female. Her scales were pale blue and her build was lean. She had trained as a scout, not a warrior. She could track prey through dense forests and move without making a sound. None of that would help her here. She was in the arena because of her father. He had borrowed money from a powerful merchant and then died before he could pay it back. The debt passed to. When she could not pay, the merchant demanded satisfaction through combat. It was an old law that few used anymore, but it was still law, had no choice. High above the arena floor, in the shadowed seats reserved for slaves, a young human woman watched the scene below. Her name was Lyra Vance, and she had been a prisoner of the for 3 weeks. Her scout ship had crashed on this world during a mapping mission, and she had been captured before she could send a distress signal. Lyra was 26 years old with brown hair cut short and practical. She had grown up on a colony world where her father taught her to hunt with a bow. She still carried that bow with her. They had not taken it because they did not understand what it was. They thought it was some kind of decoration or religious object. They had never seen a ranged weapon like it. Down on the sand, the fight began. Did not rush. He walked toward with slow, heavy steps, dragging his hammer behind him. He wanted to savor this. He wanted the crowd to see every moment of fear on his opponent's face. Circled to her left, keeping distance between them. She knew she could not block that hammer. One solid hit would shatter her bones. Her only chance was to stay moving and hope for an opening. Swung, the hammer cut through the air with a sound like tearing cloth, dove aside, and the weapon crashed into the sand where she had been standing. She scrambled to her feet and slashed at his arm. Her blade scraped uselessly against his scales. The crowd laughed, smiled. He swung again. For several minutes dodged and ran. She was fast and she was desperate, and somehow she stayed alive. But she was getting tired. Her lungs burned and her legs ached, was not even breathing hard. The end came quickly. Stumbled on a loose stone and his backhand caught her across the chest. She flew through the air and landed hard on her back. Her blade skittered away across the sand. Walked to where she lay and stood over her. He raised his hammer high above his head. The crowd fell silent. They wanted to hear the sound of the killing blow. Closed her eyes. She thought of her mother who had died when she was young. She thought of her father who had tried so hard to give her a good life. She hoped they were waiting for her somewhere beyond this world. She braced for death. A sound cut through the silence. It was a sharp hiss like nothing anyone in that arena had ever heard. Something flew past its ear so close she felt the wind of its passing. Made a strange gurgling noise, opened her eyes. The champion stood frozen above her. His hammer slipped from his fingers and thudded into the sand. His yellow eyes were wide with confusion. An arrow stuck out from his throat, buried deep in the soft flesh between his scales. Blood ran down his chest in a dark river. The Unbroken fell. His massive body hit the ground beside and did not move again. The arena went completely silent. 50,000 stared in shock at their fallen champion. No one understood what had happened. No one had seen anyone approach him. He had simply fallen with a strange stick protruding from his neck. Then someone pointed up at the slave section. All eyes turned to the human woman standing at the railing. She held a curved wooden object in her hands. A second arrow was already fitted to the string. Lyra Vance looked down at the crowd with steady eyes. Her heart pounded, but her hands did not shake. She had not planned to do this. She had watched the small female fight with hopeless courage, and something inside her had refused to watch her die. Guards began pushing through the crowd toward her. Lyra did not run. There was nowhere to go. She lowered her bow and waited. Down on the sand, sat up slowly. She stared at the dead champion beside her. She stared at the human above. She did not understand what had just happened, but she knew one thing for certain. She was alive. The crowd began to murmur. The murmur grew to shouts. Some were angry, some were afraid, all were confused. In all the history of the Grand Arena, nothing like this had ever happened. A champion had fallen to a weapon no one could see or understand. A human slave had killed a god. And nothing on the planet would ever be the same again. They brought Lyra before the High Council in chains. 4 guards held her arms and 2 more walked behind with spears pointed at her back. They treated her like she might explode at any moment. In a way, she supposed she had already done exactly that. The council chamber was a vast hall of black stone with pillars that rose up into darkness. Torches burned along the walls and cast dancing shadows across the floor. At the far end of the hall, 7 elders sat on raised seats carved from the same dark stone. They wore robes of deep purple, and their scales were gray with age. High Speaker sat in the center. He was ancient even by standards. His scales had faded to almost white, and his eyes were milky but sharp. He had ruled the council for 60 years, and he had seen many strange things in that time. But he had never seen anything like the human who stood before him now. Lyra's bow had been taken from her. 2 scholars stood off to the side examining it with great care. They turned it over in their hands and plucked at the string. They clearly had no idea what it was. "You killed our champion," said. His voice was dry and cold like wind through dead leaves. "You killed the Unbroken from across the arena without moving from your seat. Explain how this is possible." Lyra looked up at him without fear. She had already accepted that she would probably die for what she had done. Fear seemed pointless now. "The weapon is called a bow," she said. "The stick that killed your champion is called an arrow. When you pull back the string and release it, the arrow flies through the air at great speed. It can kill from 100 meters away, sometimes more." Murmurs ran through the chamber. The scholars examining the bow looked at it with new eyes. One of them carefully pulled back the string and let it go. It snapped forward with a sharp twang. "A weapon that kills from a distance," said slowly, "without throwing, without any visible motion at the moment of death." "Yes. Why have we never seen such a thing before?" Lyra shrugged as much as her chains allowed. "Humans invented the bow thousands of years ago. We have had many generations to improve it. I do not know why your people never developed something similar. Perhaps you never needed to. You are larger and stronger than most species. Close combat has always favored you." Commander stepped forward from the shadows at the side of the hall. He was younger than the council members with dark green scales and eyes that missed nothing. He led the military, and he saw every situation in terms of advantage and threat. "This weapon could change everything," he said. "Our soldiers fight the collective in close combat. We lose many warriors because they are fast and numerous, but if our soldiers could kill from a distance before the enemy reached them." He left the thought unfinished. Every in the room understood what he meant. Nodded slowly. "Bring the other one." Guards opened a side door and pushed into the chamber. She stumbled and nearly fell. Her pale blue scales were dirty and her eyes were wide with confusion. No one had told her why she had been brought here. "By the ancient laws of the arena," said, "when a combatant is killed by the intervention of another, the survivor becomes bound to the one who intervened. The debt of life must be repaid through service." He looked at Lyra. "This female belongs to you now, human." Eyes went even wider. She looked at Lyra with a mixture of shock and something that might have been horror. To be bound to an alien was considered deeply shameful among the. Lyra felt sick. She had not known about this law. She had only wanted to save someone from dying. She had not wanted to own anyone. "I do not want her," Lyra said. "I do not believe in owning people." "What you want does not matter," replied. "The law is the law. She is yours until you release her or until she repays the debt." Lyra wanted to argue, but she could see it would do no good. These people followed their laws without question. She would have to find another way to free later. Leaned forward in his seat. "Now we come to the matter of your future, human. You have a choice. You can teach our warriors to build and use this weapon you call a bow. If you do this well, you will eventually earn your freedom and safe passage off our world. And if I refuse, then you will be executed for the murder of our champion. And this female, who is now your property, will be executed as well, since the law holds owner and servant equally responsible." Lyra felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. She looked at. The female met her eyes. Did not speak, but Lyra could read the message in her gaze. Do not let them use me to control you. But Lyra could not watch someone else die because of her. Not again. My father taught me to shoot, she said quietly, more to herself than to the council. He said the bow was the first weapon that let the weak stand against the strong. She remembered sitting beside him on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the colony fields. He had been a soldier once before he became a farmer. He had taught her to hunt and to survive, and to never give up no matter how bad things seemed. Lyra looked up at. Her jaw was tight with anger she could not fully hide. If I teach your soldiers, you will use this knowledge to kill. You will become more efficient conquerors. We are already conquerors, said simply. With or without your weapon, the only question is whether you and this female will live to see tomorrow. Lyra closed her eyes. She thought of standing in that arena, braced for death. She thought of the courage it took to face a monster like with nothing but a dull blade and desperate hope. She could not let that courage mean nothing. I will teach you, she said. Smiled, it was not a kind smile. A wise decision. Commander will oversee your training program. You begin tomorrow. The guards led Lyra and away. As they walked through the dark corridors, moved close to Lyra and spoke in a whisper. You should have let them kill me. Now they will use you. Lyra did not answer. She was already thinking about how she could turn this situation to her advantage. She would teach them to shoot, but she would teach them slowly and badly, and while she taught, she would look for a way to escape. She was not done fighting yet. 3 months passed at the military training compound. Lyra had fallen into a routine that felt almost normal if she did not think too hard about her situation. Every morning she woke before dawn. Every morning was already awake, sitting by the door of their shared quarters like a guard. The compound was a sprawling complex of stone buildings surrounded by high walls. Soldiers trained in the courtyards from sunrise to sunset. The sound of clashing weapons and shouted orders filled the air from the moment Lyra opened her eyes until long after dark. She had been given a workshop where she built bows from local materials. The wood on this planet was different from what she had used back home. It was harder and less flexible. The first dozen bows she made had snapped during testing, but she had learned to adapt, and now she could produce weapons that worked almost as well as the one she had brought from her ship. Her students were a group of 20 soldiers chosen by Commander. They came to her workshop every afternoon, and she taught them how to hold the bow, how to draw the string, how to aim and release. She taught them badly. Not obviously badly. She was too smart for that. But she gave them small, incorrect habits that would limit their accuracy. She told them to grip the bow too tightly. She showed them a release that would send the arrow slightly off course. She praised them when they missed and gently corrected them when they hit the target. After 3 months, her best student could barely hit a target at 30 meters. A child back on her colony could have done better in a week. Sergeant Kell was the most dedicated of her students. He was a large with dark red scales and a permanent scowl. He hated humans. He made no secret of this, but he also respected skill, and he could see that Lyra had skill even if he could not yet match it. Your arm is shaking, Lyra told him one afternoon as he drew back his bow. That is why your shots go wide. My arm does not shake, Kell growled. It does. You are holding your breath. Breathe normally. Let the tension flow out of your muscles. Kell tried again. His arrow flew past the target and buried itself in the dirt wall behind. He cursed and threw the bow down. This weapon is foolish, he said. A warrior should face his enemy blade to blade, not hide at a distance like a coward. Lyra picked up the bow and checked it for damage. They do not care about your warrior honor. They swarm and overwhelm. Distance is the only advantage you will have against them. Kell had no answer for that. He stormed away to nurse his wounded pride. Watched him go from her spot in the corner of the workshop. She rarely spoke during training sessions. She simply observed everything with quiet, intelligent eyes. He will report your poor teaching to Commander soon, she said after Kell was gone. He grows frustrated. I know, Lyra said. I am running out of time. A human man appeared in the doorway. His name was Ben, and he was the only other human prisoner in the compound. He was in his 40s with graying hair and clever hands. He had been a mechanic on a cargo ship before they captured him. Now he repaired their vehicles and maintained their equipment. We need to talk, Ben said, somewhere private. They walked to the far end of the workshop where the noise of training would cover their voices, followed without being asked. Over the past 3 months she had become Lyra's shadow. At first Lyra had found it uncomfortable. Now she was grateful for the company. "I found something," Ben said. He kept his voice low. "There is a communication array in the vehicle depot. It was damaged, but I have been fixing it piece by piece whenever I get a chance. I think I can send a signal to human space." Lyra felt hope spark in her chest for the first time in months. "Can they trace the signal back to us?" "I do not think so. The array is designed for short burst transmissions. I can send a distress call with our coordinates and then shut it down before anyone notices." "Do it." Ben nodded. "Tonight, there is a shift change at midnight. I will have maybe 5 minutes before anyone checks on me." He slipped away as quietly as he had come. Lyra turned to find watching her with an unreadable expression. "You are trying to escape," said. "It was not a question." "Yes, and when I go, you will be free. I will release you from any obligation before I leave." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I do not wish to be released." Lyra blinked in surprise. "What?" "I have watched you for 3 months. You risk yourself to protect others. You treat me as an equal even though your people do not own slaves. You teach these soldiers badly because you do not want them to use your weapon for conquest." His voice grew stronger. "I was raised to believe that strength is all that matters, that the weak exist to serve the strong. But you are not weak, Lyra Vance. You are stronger than anyone I have ever known, and your strength has nothing to do with the size of your body." Lyra did not know what to say. She had not expected this. "Among my people," continued, "I was nothing, a small female with no value except what I could produce for others. But you saw me in that arena. You saw me fighting even though I had no hope, and you decided I was worth saving." Her eyes were bright. "No one has ever thought I was worth anything before." Lyra reached out and took his hand. The scales were cool and smooth under her fingers. "You are worth everything," Lyra said. "And when we get out of here, I am going to show you a galaxy where size does not determine value." The next morning, Commander called Lyra to his office. His expression was cold as he looked at the training reports. 3 months, he said, and your students can barely hit a stationary target. Explain this." Lyra had prepared for this moment. She opened her mouth to give a carefully crafted excuse about the difficulty of learning a new weapon. Before she could speak, an alarm began to wail across the compound. Soldiers ran past the windows shouting orders, stood up sharply, his hand going to his weapon. "What is happening?" Lyra asked. His face had gone pale beneath his scales. They have found us." Through the window, Lyra could see dark shapes descending from the sky. Dozens of them, hundreds. The enemy had come to the training compound. And they had come for her. They came down from the sky like a storm of black wings and sharp claws. They were creatures with gleaming dark shells and compound eyes that reflected the morning sun. Each one stood as tall as but their bodies were thin and built for speed. Their limbs ended in curved blades that could cut through armor like paper. Lyra had heard stories about them during her time at the compound. They were the great enemy of the Empire. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next world. But they had never attacked this far behind lines before. This was not a random raid. This was targeted. "They know about the bows," said as he watched the attack unfold from his office window. "They know what you have been teaching here. They want to destroy you before the weapon can spread to the front lines." "How?" Lyra asked. "How could they know?" "Spies captured soldiers. It does not matter now." Grabbed a blade from the wall and headed for the door. "Most of our forces are at the front. We have maybe 200 soldiers here. Against that," he gestured at the swarm of descending on the compound, "we will not last an hour." He was gone before Lyra could respond. She stood frozen for a moment, watching the chaos outside. Soldiers ran in every direction. The sound of combat rose from the outer walls. Screams mixed with the high-pitched shrieking of the appeared in the doorway. "Lyra, we need to move." Lyra's mind snapped back into focus. "The workshop, my bow is there, and the training bows." They ran through the compound together. Bodies already littered the ground, and alike lay tangled in death. The air smelled of blood and smoke. Buildings burned where it had broken through. The workshop was still standing when they reached it. Lyra grabbed her bow and the quiver of arrows she had made over the past months. There were maybe 40 arrows. It would have to be enough. "Take the training bows," she told. "Find any of my students who are still alive. Bring them here." Did not argue. She gathered the bows and disappeared into the smoke. Lyra climbed to the roof of the workshop. From here she could see the entire compound. They had breached the main gate and were flooding in like black water. The defenders were being pushed back on every side. She spotted a cluster of soldiers making a last stand near the vehicle depot. They were surrounded and outnumbered. In minutes they would be overrun. Lyra drew her bow and took aim. The distance was nearly 80 meters, a difficult shot, but not impossible. She released. The arrow took her through the head. The creature dropped without a sound. Its companions looked around in confusion. They could not see where the death had come from. Lyra fired again. Another fell. She fired a third time, a fourth, a fifth. They began to panic. They could not fight an enemy they could not see. Some broke away from the attack and scattered. The soldiers took the opportunity to regroup. Returned with 6 of Lyra's students. Kel was among them. His red scales were spattered with blood, but his eyes were clear. "You need to help them," Lyra said, pointing at the surrounded soldiers. "Get on high ground. Stay spread out. Do not let them get close." "We cannot shoot well enough," Kel said. "You know this." "Then shoot badly, but shoot often. Make them afraid. Make them think there are archers everywhere." Kel stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his eyes. He had finally understood that her poor teaching had been deliberate, that she had been sabotaging them all along. He could have called her out. He could have refused to help. Instead he nodded. "Show me how to hold the bow properly. We do not have time for bad habits anymore." Lyra showed him. She showed all of them. In 5 minutes she corrected 3 months of deliberate mistakes. It was not enough to make them expert archers, but it was enough to make them dangerous. The students scattered to take positions around the compound. Arrows began to fly from unexpected directions. The offensive stuttered and slowed. But the enemy was not stupid. They realized where the arrows were coming from. A group of them broke away from the main attack and headed directly for the workshop. Leading them was a creature larger than the others. Its shell was dark red instead of black, and its eyes gleamed with cold intelligence. This was a hive commander. They were telepathically linked to their commanders. Kill the leader and the swarm would fall into chaos. The hive commander had come for Lyra personally. Lyra called out, "Get inside, find something to barricade the door." No, stood beside her on the roof with a blade in her hand. "I will not hide while you fight alone." There was no time to argue. They reached the workshop and began to climb. They swarmed up the walls like insects, their clawed limbs finding purchase in the smallest cracks. Lyra fired as fast as she could. Each arrow found a target. Bodies fell from the walls, but more kept coming, always more. The hive commander reached the roof first. It was fast, faster than anything Lyra had ever seen. One moment it was at the edge. The next it was right in front of her, its blade arm sweeping toward her head. Lyra threw herself backward. The blade missed her throat by inches. She rolled and came up with an arrow in her hand. No time to draw the bow. She drove the arrow into the creature's chest like a dagger. The hive commander screamed, a sound that was not sound. Lyra felt it in her mind like a spike of ice. The creature lashed out and caught her across the shoulder. Blood sprayed. Pain exploded through her body. Attacked from behind. Her blade carved a deep wound across the hive commander's back. The creature spun and knocked her aside with a casual blow, hit the roof hard and did not get up. Lyra scrambled for her bow. Her shoulders screamed in protest, but she forced herself to move. She grabbed an arrow and drew the string back with shaking hands. The hive commander turned back to her. Blood leaked from its wounds, but it did not slow. Its eyes burned with hatred. "You are the one who teaches death from afar," it said. Its voice was wrong. Too many tones at once, like several creatures speaking together. "Your knowledge dies with you." It lunged. Lyra released. The arrow punched through the creature's eye and deep into its brain. The hive commander stopped mid-stride. It stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then it collapsed. Across the compound, the attack fell apart. Without their commander, the creatures lost coordination. They broke and scattered, and the soldiers cut them down as they fled. Lyra dropped her bow and crawled to where lay. The female was breathing but unconscious. A dark bruise was spreading across her scales. "Stay with me," Lyra whispered. "We are not done yet." From somewhere beyond the compound walls, a new sound rose, a deep rumbling that Lyra recognized. Engines, ship engines. She looked up and saw a vessel descending through the clouds. It was not. It was human. Ben's signal had gotten through. Help had finally come. Lyra sat on the ruined roof within her arms and watched the ship land. She was bleeding and exhausted and surrounded by death, but she was alive. And against all odds, they had won. The human ship was called the Steady Wind. It landed in the center of the compound where the bodies had been cleared away. The hatches opened and soldiers in gray armor poured out, their weapons raised and ready for any threat. Captain Grace stepped out last. She was a tall woman in her 50s with silver hair cut close to her head and a face that had seen many battles. She surveyed the destruction around her with calm, professional eyes. Commander met her at the base of the ramp. He was wounded. A deep cut ran across his chest and one arm hung limp at his side, but he stood straight and proud as any officer should. "You have entered space without permission," he said. "This is an act of war." "We received a distress call from human prisoners held in this facility," replied. Her voice was flat and hard. "We came to recover our people, nothing more. Your people are slaves, property of the Empire. Humans do not recognize slavery. Your laws mean nothing to us." The tension between them was thick enough to cut. Soldiers on both sides raised their weapons. One wrong word and blood would flow again. Lyra pushed through the crowd. Her shoulder had been bandaged, but she could barely move her arm, walked beside her, still unsteady from the blows she had taken during the battle. "Stop," Lyra said. "Both of you stop." She stepped between and both commanders looked at her with surprise. "Captain, these people held me prisoner. They forced me to train their soldiers. I should hate them." She turned to face. "But Commander, your soldiers fought beside me today, died protecting this compound from the... Some of them died protecting me." She looked at Kel, who stood nearby with a bow still in his hands. His red scales were covered in dried blood, but his eyes met hers without hostility for the first time. "We have a common enemy," Lyra continued. "They attacked this compound because they were afraid of what humans and could accomplish together. They were right to be afraid. A handful of archers held off an army today. Imagine what we could do if we actually worked as allies." Was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You taught my soldiers badly on purpose. You sabotaged your own training program." "Yes, because I did not want to help conquerors become more dangerous. And yet when the enemy came, you taught them properly. You fought beside them." "I fought beside people, not conquerors, not slaves, just people trying to survive." A new figure appeared at the top of the ship's ramp. She was a small woman with black hair and kind eyes. Ambassador had been sent to assess the situation and negotiate if necessary. She walked down the ramp with careful, measured steps. "Commander," she said, "the Empire and the Human Confederation have never had formal contact before. Perhaps it is time we changed that." Looked around at the destruction, at the bodies, at the soldiers who had survived only because a human had taught them a new way to fight. "The High Council will need to approve any agreement," he said slowly. "Then let us speak with the High Council." His voice was gentle but firm. "We have technology that could help you against the... You have resources and territory that could benefit our expansion. There is room for partnership here." "And the human prisoners?" "Released immediately. That is not negotiable." Turned to look at Lyra. "The female belongs to this one. By our law, only she can release her." Lyra did not hesitate. "I release you from any obligation or debt. You are free. You owe me nothing." The words hung in the air. By law was now completely free. She could return to her old life. She could disappear into the crowds and never see Lyra again. Stepped forward, she looked then at Lyra. "I request permission to join the human ship," she said. "Not as property, not as payment for a debt, but as a free person choosing where she wishes to go." "You would leave your own kind?" asked. There was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. "I was never truly one of my kind. I was too small, too weak, but this human saw worth in me that no ever did. I wish to learn more about a people who measure strength by character rather than size." Captain looked at Lyra. "Is this what you want?" Lyra smiled despite her pain. "Saved my life on that roof. I would be honored to have her with us." The negotiations took 3 days. Ambassador spoke with High Speaker through communication screens. Terms were discussed and argued and finally agreed upon. They would release all human prisoners. In exchange, human advisors would teach soldiers the proper use of ranged weapons. Trade routes would be established. A formal alliance against them would be considered. On the final day, A ceremony was held in what remained of the training compound, and humans stood together as Lyra was officially recognized as the first human ambassador to the Empire. It was a temporary title until a proper diplomat could be assigned, but it carried weight. After the ceremony, Lyra found a quiet moment alone with. They stood on the roof of the workshop where they had fought the Hive Commander. The bloodstains had been cleaned away, but Lyra could still feel the ghost of that battle in her bones. "I never thanked you properly," said, "for saving me in the arena." "You do not need to thank me. I could not watch you die. It was as simple as that." "For you perhaps. For me it was everything." Looked out over the compound where soldiers from both species moved and worked together. "I was braced for death that day. I had accepted that my life was over, and then an arrow flew past my ear and changed everything." Lyra thought about her father, about the colony world where she had grown up, about all the times he had told her that one person could make a difference if they were willing to act. "My father used to say that the bow was humanity's first great equalizer," she said. "A small person with a bow could stand against anyone. Size and strength did not matter, only skill and courage. Your father was wise. He would have liked you." Turned to face her. "What happens now?" Lyra considered the question. The steady wind would leave soon. She could go with it. She could return to human space and resume her old life as if none of this had ever happened. But she looked at the soldiers who were learning to shoot properly now, really learning. She looked at Kel, who had nodded at her this morning with something that might have been respect. "I am going to stay," she said. "At least for a while. Someone needs to make sure this alliance works. Someone needs to teach them not just how to shoot but why we shoot. To protect, not to conquer." Smiled. It was the first real smile Lyra had ever seen on her face. "Then I will stay too." That evening, as the sun set over the compound, Lyra taught her first real archery class. Her students were, and human together, stood among them with a bow in her hands. She drew back the string the way Lyra had shown her. She aimed at the target 50 meters away. The arrow flew straight and true. It hit the center. Lyra smiled. An arrow had started all of this. An arrow fired in desperation to save a stranger from death. Now arrows would build something new, a bridge between species, a path toward peace. And it had all begun because lost her fight, braced for death, and heard a human arrow hiss past her ear.